DND number 4, Weeds Grow in Jesus' Name, Chapter 14. It was making her crazy, Bree thought as she stood on the large deck just outside the dining room. It was making the entire family crazy. This couldn't go on indefinitely. She had to do something. She could go to the FBI and tell them that she wanted to be bait, go out alone, pull Tommy out of hiding. Yet with her celeb status and the Keno family name, they'd probably tell her no way, and then they'd tell her family what she'd offered, and then they'd lock her in her room, and she'd never see the light of day. There must be something she could do, though, something no one had thought of doing. She'd been told that possibly someone from Tommy's camp was watching the house, or at least watching the road outside the house, and that Tommy would know in an instant if one of the family were to leave alone. Security had made several sweeps of the area around the Keno property and turned up nothing. However, that didn't mean they weren't there. She knew, though, that if they were being watched, it wouldn't be Tommy himself watching. He'd have one of his little yes men doing the hard stuff. That took Bree's mind in a different direction. She wondered how much Tommy was paying these guys to do all this for him. Surely they realized he would let them take the fall for him in an instant. Were they family members with undying loyalty? No, Jason said Tommy was the last of the Crane family. So they were doing this for money. Well, surely she had as much or more money than Tommy. Could she persuade his men, or at least one man, to change sides? All he'd have to do is give up Tommy's location. Enough money would make even the most loyal turn. It was a possibility. The question is, how can she even arrange to talk to one of Tommy's men? Ricky would never let her out alone, and neither would her assigned bodyguard. She glanced toward Jeff Davis, standing a discreet distance away. Possibly she could give him the slip. Maybe, definitely with a little help, like one of her Valium, or maybe something even more potent. The question was, how could she get a message to Tommy's man that she wanted to meet with him? She'd have to come up with that. Where would she meet him? Maybe on the beach. If she could ditch her bodyguard on the beach, she could head south. That's the quickest way to disappear from the view of the house. She could meet him, strike a deal, and have him turn. How hard could it be? Starting to feel the exhilaration of taking something into her own hands, she realized she really could do this. It could work. Her brow furrowed as she thought. She'd have to choose a time when Ricky was away. She might have to send him away. Yes, that's it. She'd send Ricky into town for something. Her heart beat hard in anticipation. Finally, she could do something. Something to help. She won't be just the pretty face everyone wants to protect. She'll show them that she's brave and innovative, and she won't feel so worthless. Besides, she truly was willing to do anything to protect Jeffy. Hi. Bree startled out of her trance. Hi, Mark. You scared me. I see that. Is everything okay? Yes, I'm just getting antsy. I know what you mean. At least Joey and I get to go to school and interact with other real live people. Speaking of getting out, you coming to my game tomorrow? Yes, I can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. He smiled at her. Great. How are you feeling, Mark? I'm okay, really. I can't wait for all this to be over. She smiled. Me too, Mark. I know I know this year's birthday turned out to be a real downer, but I watched the way you handled yourself through all this, and I have to say, little brother, I'm very proud of you. You've turned into a man right before my eyes. He blushed. Thanks, Bree. So, I guess all the times we got on your nerves growing up are forgiven? I don't remember anything but good times with you guys. I was so much older than you. Really, it was kind of like the way you feel about Jeffy. I just thought you and Joey were both the cutest kids in the world, and it was hard for you to do something that really bothered me when you were so adorable. You think that would still work? Unfortunately, yes. She reached up and ruffled his hair. Let me ask you something now. Has all the celebrity hype since my first Oscar nomination been difficult to deal with? Has it made it harder for you and Joey in school? Nah. If anything, it got us a few hot dates. But You don't want girls to date you because your sister is some stupid famous actress, do you? Mark grinned. Well, it depends on the girl. She laughed. You sound like Ricky. He shrugged. Well, he's been a big influence in my life. Well, I hope you pick up some of his good qualities, too. Me, too. I have much love and respect for Ricky. She looked down. Mark moved forward and put his arm around her. I have much love and respect for you, too, sis. I know Mom and Dad's divorce was hardest on you. I know you were torn. I know you kept a smile on your face and gave Mom all your support. I'm proud of you for finishing college and keeping at the acting when you felt discouraged and down, and all the while, you were always there for me and Joey. You're the best, Bree. She sniffed and laid her head on his shoulder. Thanks, Mark. No prob. New scene. Joey and Mark had elected to attend public school for the benefit of Mark's football career and because they wanted to be like normal kids, not pampered, not snobby, not spoiled. They wanted to work hard for what they achieved. They weren't worried about not getting as good an education as they could in a more elite private school. Between their father, mother, stepfather, and stepbrother, always pushing knowledge, being the key to excellence, they were constantly going way past the curve. Jason's Ameritech agents were complete professionals and therefore approached accompanying the family to the very public high school football game soberly. Their huge entourage caught everyone's notice, and Joey, for once, felt almost ashamed of his family's celebrity status. Joey had to get permission to sit with some friends, and even then his agent never left his side. It was the football game that gave Bree the great idea. Mark's team won, thanks to Mark and his perfect mechanics, perfect arm slot, his ability to scramble, his ability to audible, and passing for 280 yards. If she had an arm like Mark's, she thought, she could put a message in a bottle and throw it over the security gate and up the facing embankment with no problem. Then she thought of riding on a football and tossing it over, but she still didn't think she could throw it far enough. Then on Sunday afternoon, she'd watched Mark and Joey playing frisbee with Jeffy, and she realized that was the solution. As silly as it seemed, she just knew it would work. She could write a message on a frisbee to have Tommy's man meet her somewhere to arrange a deal. She would throw the frisbee over the gate and across the road, and if someone was watching like she'd been told, he would retrieve the frisbee. It would work. It had to. She was at her wit's end. New scene. She walked toward the front gate. The words were written in black permanent marker. Meet me tomorrow beyond the rocks at the top south beach. I'll make it worth your time. This is not a trick. No one knows I'm making you this offer. Don't tell Tommy, and you stand to double whatever he's paying you. B.A. She smiled. It sounded so cryptic, but this was definitely no game. She'd gone to great lengths to make this work. She whipped her arm out, and the frisbee went sailing off across the street and up into the wooded area. That ought to do it, she thought. She obtained a tiny dose of GHP that tomorrow would be administered to Mr. Jeff Davis, or Agent Jeff Davis, the bodyguard assigned to her by Jason. Bless his heart. She hoped he wouldn't be in too much trouble. She decided that she'd send Ricky out for something she was craving, maybe ice cream. She didn't really need much time, just enough to make a deal. Money for information. Everything depended on Tommy's man being for sale to the highest bidder. And if things didn't go well, she'd made arrangements for that too. She walked back toward the house, and Jeff Davis came running toward her. You want me to go get your frisbee? No, thanks. It was old anyway. She took his arm. Tomorrow, I'd like to go down to the beach and work on my tan. Would you mind? No, of course not. I'll arrange it. What time? How about around noon? Yes, ma'am. She squeezed his arm. I know you'll be around, but I'd like you to stay close by. I'll need someone to talk to. It keeps my mind off the heat. Would you mind terribly? No, ma'am. I don't mind talking to you. Just don't distract me too much or I won't be able to do my job. Oh, I wouldn't dream of it, she cooed. New scene. Good morning, gorgeous, Ricky said softly from the doorway. Morning. She rolled over and crooked a finger at him. He came to her and kissed her soundly. Is it too soon since your trauma to ask you when you intend to make love to me again? He swallowed. He needed to have a talk with her about that, but it just didn't seem like the optimum time. Uh, well, it's okay, Ricky. No pressure. Just so you know that I still love you and really look forward to us being together. Every time I look at you, every time you touch me, my body yearns for you. It's a wonderful feeling. She sighed. What if it wears off? What if we burn out and there's nothing left? Don't borrow trouble. No, really, Ricky, what if? He lay down next to her. Well, my feelings for you are about much more than sex. Sex is good. Sex is really good. But, Bree, I want you for my companion and to share my beliefs and my thoughts and hopes and dreams. She sighed. We haven't had much time to talk. It's been a little hectic. We'll make up for lost time once Tommy's back behind bars. I used to know you so well. Remember when you would come to visit me in New York and we'd visit all the art shows and museums and we'd go to the little off-Broadway shows and then go to a coffee house and talk about what they'd meant for hours? He touched her nose. I remember. That's when I fell in love with you. You were so young and so very smart. You found deep meaning in everything and you taught me so much. I taught you? You, the world traveler? You who had 2 college degrees and multiple black belts in multiple disciplines? You who spoke 3 languages? 5. See? How could I teach you anything? Well, everything I learned, everything I experienced up to that point had no meaning. And then you came along and pointed it out to me. You opened my eyes. I'd say I enjoyed a book and you'd ask me why. You made me think. You were already a thinker. Your father trained you to be so. My father is an amazing man and an amazing teacher, but I still struggle to make him proud. Oh, Ricky, he's so very proud of you. You should see how he looks at you. Sometimes I think he might burst. You're so very lucky to have him. I am, I know. Right now, though, I'm feeling extremely lucky to have you, and I've wanted you for so long. And here you are, talking to me, lying next to me in my bed. It's my bed. He smiled. Whatever. Point is, I'm grateful, Bree, for you and for this time. She moved close. Me too, she said, lifting her mouth for his kiss. Her mind went to what she had planned for the day. With luck, all the bad stuff would be over very soon. Then she and Ricky would figure out just what they were going to do with the rest of their lives. She moaned with pleasure at his kiss. He lifted his head. So what are your plans today? I'm going down to the beach to work on my tan. Oh, I wish I could join you. She sat up. Why? Where are you going? Steve and I have a meeting. He may have some information about Tommy. He has been able to turn up absolutely squat. He's hoping this lead may pan out. She smiled. That would make things so much easier for her as far as getting Ricky out of the house. She couldn't wait to be able to come back home and have what they wanted so badly in her hot little hands. New scene. Thank you so much for going to the trouble of arranging this outing. I was going out of my mind. I know you had to go over the entire beach first. It's no problem, Miss Adams, Jeff said. Please call me Bree. Yes, ma'am. She smiled at him. He was young and oh, so very serious about his job. She felt a small pang of guilt for what she was about to do to him. Right here looks good, she said. She looked back up at the house. Hopefully Eric and her mom and Jeffy would stay down in the music room for at least an hour. Ricky left for his meeting a couple of hours ago, and she didn't expect him home anytime soon. Mark and Joey were at school. She licked her lips. Jeff helped her spread out a blanket and set her cooler down next to her. He then moved a few feet away and opened a lounge chair. Once Bree was settled on her blanket, he sat in the chair, his back straight, his eyes continuously scanning the area. Bree watched him through the corner of her eye as she removed her swimsuit cover. She wore a tiny white string bikini. The man visibly swallowed. She smiled. She admitted sometimes it's fun to know you have that kind of impact on men. Sighing as she moved, she pulled out her tanning oil and began to apply it. So tell me, Jeff, she stopped and looked up at him. Do you mind if I call you by your first name? No, ma'am, I don't mind. Is it really Jeffrey? Actually, it's Jefferson. She glanced up, smiling. Jefferson Davis? He blushed. Yes, ma'am. She looked him over. He was devastatingly cute. Neatly trimmed, dark blonde hair, green eyes, dimples, and a gorgeous smile that showed straight white teeth. He was well over about 6 feet, lean and well muscled. Okay, so tell me, Jeff, why did Jason pick you to watch over me? His eyes scanned the rocks to the south before he answered. Well, he chose the 3 fastest with the highest testing scores to watch over you, Mrs. Keno and Juneflower. He figures the men just need someone to watch their backs. So, you're one of the best. Mr. Lee seems to think so. She nodded. You're awfully young. How old are you? I'm 22, ma'am. I see. And this is the line of work you'd like to go into? Yes, ma'am. At one time, I thought I would join the FBI, but then I realized I don't do government well. Ameritech Security has a huge reputation. I went through the application process, and Mr. Lee accepted me. He runs it like his own personal FBI. The training is the same or better. The technology Mr. Lee uses is the best. Jason consults for the FBI, so I guess he would know how to train his own men comparably. Yes, ma'am, he's the best. And I know Master Keno trained him originally, so I'm like surrounded by all my heroes here on this job. And then Ricky Keno is right here, not to mention you. Oh, he stopped. Bree smiled. Don't stop, it's okay. He looked down. Well, ma'am, I just meant that it's a privilege to have this opportunity. I understand. Sighing, she realized she'd have to step in with Jason and help this guy out, bless his heart. She watched him. He stood every once in a while and did a sweep of the area, then sat back down so that she could talk to him like she'd requested. He wore slacks and a dark t-shirt. He began to break a sweat, and Bree made her move. She reached back and pulled the small cooler toward her, opened it up. It's getting pretty warm. I've brought 2 bottles of lemonade. Here, there's one for you. He accepted it. Thanks. She smiled sweetly. You're welcome. She opened the cap on hers and drew from the bottle, watching him as he did the same. It only took 15 more minutes of conversation before she noticed him wiping his brow and breathing heavy. Jeff, she said softly. His head turned slowly to look at her. He blinked his eyes as if he were trying to focus. Yes, he answered. I want to tell you now that I'm sorry and that I promise I'll make it up to you. His brow creased. Ma'am? How are you feeling? Actually, ma'am, I'm not feeling very well. I don't know what's happening to me. I'd better call for backup. His hand went to his mic. No, Bree said quickly. I'm sure it's just the sun, and you're wearing dark colors. I think you're overheated. She began pulling on her swimsuit cover. He went again for his mic, but Bree reached up and grabbed his hand. It's okay, Jeff. His hand went slack in hers, and his head fell on his chest, and she laid his hand gently on his lap and patted it. I swear I'll make it up to you, she whispered. Bree quickly gathered her bag, checked its contents, and took off down the beach, glancing over her shoulder one last time as the house disappeared from view. Her heart pounded. Now that what she was doing was a reality, she felt a prickle of fear. She drew a deep breath. She could do this. A half-mile down the beach, she eyed the outcropping of rocks. She expected and felt the surge of adrenaline. Moving forward past the first large rock cliff, she turned left and started to climb. About halfway up, she came to a small landing, about 20 feet in diameter. She considered waiting there, but realized he may never find her there. Also, she wanted more room, so she continued up. Once she got to the top, she stood for a moment or two, catching her breath. There was no one in sight. If he was coming, he was probably watching her to make sure she was alone. She turned to face the ocean and sat down near the edge of the rocks she'd just climbed. Well, she thought, here goes. As she sat, she kept her senses on full alert. She'd been there about 20 minutes when she sensed someone's approach. She turned and stood. He was looking at a Hispanic male, about her age. He was sweaty and dirty. Hey, pretty lady, the man said with a thick Spanish accent. Bree nodded. Hello. So, you want to talk money? I thought it would be a good place to start. He circled around her and looked down the rocks toward the beach. You're alone? Yes. What's your name? Hector. I'm Bree, but I guess you know that. Duh. She felt like an idiot and suddenly way out of her league. I know who you are. So talk, Hector said. I, uh, I was wondering why you were doing what Tommy asked you to do, and I realized he must be paying you. Yeah? So, I was thinking whatever he's paying you, I could top it. You want to pay me? For what? Well, first for information, then to just go away. His eyes traveled her body and came back to her face. What kind of information? Tommy's location. He nodded. And then once I give you this information, you give me the money and I slip quietly away and no one messes with me. Well, I can't guarantee what happens to you after I pay you. And yes, you go away and don't bother our family again. He reached out and touched her bag with one finger. She stepped back. You have the money with you? Of course not. You tell me what I want to know. I take that information and we see if it's correct. Then you get your money. He stepped forward. His finger moved to stroke her arm just above her wrist. No money, no information. She thrust her chin into the air. No information, no money. He smiled at her. Well, I suggest we reach a compromise or this meeting is over. I have to have something to take back with me. He gave a wicked laugh. How about I let you go back with your life? She stepped away again. Listen, Hector, I'm offering you a great deal of money. He sighed and thought, how do I know you'll keep your word? She shrugged. I don't know how you'll know. All I can say is our family's big on honesty and honor, and if I say I'll pay you, then I will. If I say you just walk away, then you will. How much money are we talking about? She thought. Well, you can name the price. His eyebrows shot up. How about 200,000? Now her eyebrows shot up. You're kidding me. Do I look like I'm kidding, lady? No, you seem quite serious. She walked away, turned and stepped closer. Okay. Hector laughed. You think I'm going to buy that? How stupid do you think I am? You ain't going to pay me no $200,000. This is bull. No, really, I'm not lying. Yeah, right. He reached out and grabbed her arm. So, you thought you were going to be smart, get me to tell you where Tommy is? Well, let me tell you something, little white lady. Tommy and I go way back. In prison, he had my back, and I had his, and your money doesn't mean anything to me. When she didn't answer, he jerked on her arm, yanking her forward. I I didn't realize. I thought you would be willing to make a smart business decision. His eyes filled with anger. You calling me stupid? He pulled her against him. Don't nobody call me stupid and get away with it, 'cause I ain't stupid. Bree stuck her hand inside her bag and pulled it out quickly. She held the business end of a 9mm pistol to his forehead. Nor am I. He stilled. Okay, lady, calm down. Oh, I'm calm. Now we're just going to climb down these rocks. You're going first, and I'll be right behind you. And I'm not used to holding a gun, and I don't know if it will accidentally go off, so no sudden moves that might startle me. Come on, lady. I wasn't going to hurt you. I was playing around. Bree thought about their old game where they used to quote movie lines, and Tombstone came to mind. Well, I wasn't, she said. Now move. They moved to the edge of the rocks. Go, she said, gesturing with the gun. He turned and lowered himself down, making sure he had his foot planted firmly on the rock below him. His eyes ran over the expanse of leg in front of him, and in a flash his hand grabbed her ankle and pulled her feet out from under her. The gun went flying down the rocks, and Bree grabbed air as she fell over Hector's head. She landed with a thud on her back on the landing below. He turned and lowered himself down next to her. Stupid white lady. You in big trouble now, aren't you? Now it's just you and me. She groaned. She hurt everywhere. Her arms and legs and everything seemed to be working. Probably just knocked the breath out of her. Struggling, she scooted toward the edge of the landing, and he grabbed her and pulled her back. Oh, no. You ain't going nowhere. The moment he let go, she stood and scrambled the opposite direction, headed back up, toward where they'd just been. He grabbed her by the legs and jerked, and she came down level with him, banging her legs on the rocks in the process. Leaning forward, Hector placed his hands on the rocks on either side of her. Might as well accept it. You ain't going nowhere till I'm done. Her body trembled. What are you going to do? This for starters. He swung hard, hitting her across the mouth. The blow knocked her to the ground. He knelt down beside her, turned her over. And now it's playtime. New scene. Ricky chatted with the man at the security gate for several minutes, and finally he moved on, swinging the car toward the front of the house. Jumping out, he left his bodyguard, Shadow, behind, grabbed the flowers he'd bought on a whim, and jogged quickly up the steps. The house was silent as he came in the front door. He went straight upstairs to Bree's room. She wasn't there. He checked his parents' room. No one there either. Little prickles of something not quite right tickled his senses. He went downstairs next, finally finding his father and Shelley and Jeffy in the music room, along with a captive audience consisting of their assigned bodyguards. Hi. I was beginning to think no one was home. Hey, Ricky, Shelley said. Jeffy's giving us a Mozart recital. You are? Ricky asked, scooping Jeffy up and kissing her cheek. He set her back down in front of the keyboard. Yes, and I'm going to play the piano just like him and write music too. And Daddy says if he enrolls me at the Smithfield School of Music, I have to keep going for at least 2 years, and I better think really hard about it, but I don't have to because I've always loved to play the piano, and I already know I want to get really good. Mom says I'm already really good and that I'm a prodigy. Do you want to hear me play something? He smiled. I do. Only not right now, okay? I want to talk to Bree first. I guess she's still out working on her tan. Well, she didn't get out until almost noon, so she's only been out about an hour, Shelley said. Well, an hour is long enough. I'll catch you guys later. The moment Ricky got to the deck, he knew something was very wrong. Bree was nowhere in sight, yet there was her blanket on the beach with the cooler sitting next to it. Jeff Davis sat in a chair a few feet away. He seemed to be dozing. Ricky scanned the water, looking to see if she decided to take a quick dip. Nothing. He ran down to speak to Davis. The man was unconscious. Ricky's heart began to pound. No, oh no, he said aloud. He pulled out his cell. Dad, Bree's gone. I'm going after her. Get help. Her footprints went off south. Only one set, hers. He picked up the bottle of lemonade, tasted it, spit it out, slightly salty. Bree, what have you done? He flew. It seemed to take him forever to cover the short distance from their private beach to where the rocks jutted out toward the ocean. The place he'd been taken. He still spotted only one set of prints, and they stopped at the rocks. New scene. She scratched, she bit, she used every bit of energy she had to fight him. Everything she did only seemed to make him madder and more determined to do his deed. He'd had to hit her several times to stun her enough to keep her still, but he finally accomplished it. It didn't take long for him to rip off her swimsuit cover. He pinned her with his body, his hands holding her hands down over her head. It was as if he was exactly following the scripted choreography Ricky had written down days ago when he'd demonstrated what could happen. And it looked like what could happen was going to happen. She screamed in a last-ditch effort to get someone to help her, and that earned her another blow across the face. He was so heavy, she felt as if she were suffocating. Her efforts to fight were slowing down, and she was losing consciousness. He let go of one of her hands to work on removing her clothing, and then suddenly she could breathe. Looking up, it seemed as if his body was floating just above hers, and then, astonishingly, it flew away from her and landed against the rocks. Trying to clear her vision, she raised her head to see what was happening. Ricky was happening. Her head fell back down. Tears of relief began to flow. She closed her eyes, unable to gather the strength to move. The scuffle between Ricky and her tormentor seemed to be happening far away. She could just barely hear the sounds. Her body was fluid, a limp puddle that she had no control over. New scene. The rage engulfed him. He'd heard the tussling and grunting of a battle being fought as he'd approached the rocks, and he'd been almost to the first landing when she'd screamed. The scene he'd encountered when he arrived drove him to madness, and even though he was immediately grateful to have found Bree alive, another side took over quickly. He pulled the man off her and tossed him against the rocks as if he were a lightweight. The man came at Ricky, but was no trained fighter. Realizing that quick enough, Ricky egged the man on. He came at Ricky, threw a punch. Ricky dodged and delivered 2, 3, knocking the man to the ground. Ricky helped him up again, made sure he could stand, and started all over again. Finally, the man fell to the ground and stopped moving. Ricky grabbed him by the hair and pulled his face out of the dirt to make sure he was totally gone. It was Bree's soft moan that pulled him out of it. He went to her and knelt by her side. Her eyes were closed, and he touched her face. She moaned and opened her eyes. "Can you move?" "I'm not sure," she mumbled. Gently, he pushed his arm beneath her back and lifted her to a sitting position. He pulled his shirt over his head and helped her put it on, and then pulled her up onto his lap. Gathering her snug in the circle of his arms, he held her tight against his chest, while her shoulders shook with the uncontrollable sobs that overtook her. While she cried, he pulled out his phone and gave his location. He stroked her hair, touched his lips to her head, and squeezed her tighter until she finally quieted. She looked up into his face, blinked the tears from her eyes. "I'm sorry." His lips pressed together in a straight line as he noted the bloody lip and bruises already starting to form on her cheek, and he nodded. "I bet," he said softly. "I thought I could help. I thought, finally, I could do something to bring all this to an end. I can't fight. Even Mom can do that. I'm just a liability. I wanted so much. Mom can do that. I'm just a liability. I wanted so much to help. I'm sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." He sighed. "We'll talk about this later, baby. You're alive. Right now, I'm just so happy with that thought that I can't find it in me to be properly angry with you. I will, though, and I guarantee so will your dad. So will Dad and your mom and your brothers, and I don't even know what to think about Jason." She sniffed. They could hear Jason's men climbing the rocks. "Come on, let's get you down off these rocks." He looked over the edge, motioning to the group of men. "There's one guy unconscious, no weapon." "Oh, there's a weapon, all right," Eric said below, holding up Bree's 9mm. Ricky shook his head. At that moment, Agent Dixon arrived from up top. He looked down over the edge. "Do we need medical?" "For one, definitely," Ricky answered, motioning toward the man who'd attacked Bree. "As for Bree," he said, looking into her eyes, "I'm okay. Please, I just want to go home." Ricky looked back up. "She says she's okay." He helped her over the edge and stayed right behind her as they climbed down in sync. When they got to the bottom, Eric handed his cell phone to Bree. "Here, tell her you're okay." Bree took the phone. "I'm okay, Mom. No, it's all my fault. I just wanted to do something to—" While Bree spoke to her mother on the phone, Eric unbuttoned his shirt and removed it. Ricky tied the long sleeves around Bree's waist to give her a little more length for modesty's sake, since one side of her bikini bottoms was ripped apart. When Bree finished speaking, Eric took the phone back and put his finger under Bree's chin to hold her still while he scrutinized her face. Blood ran from her swollen lip. A bruise had begun to form on her cheek. He shook his head. "I guess you're more like your mother than I originally thought." Tears welled in her eyes again. "I'm sorry, Eric. Please don't be mad." "Okay. I'll be happy to leave that completely up to Ricky and the others." He smiled. "Pretty scary experience, huh?" She nodded with a smile. "Pretty scary." Eric's eyes met Ricky's, and Ricky nodded. "Pretty scary." And that is the end of chapter 14.